The Starstrider Ranger. It felt magnificent returning to the Starstrider Ranger after extensive combat training at Base Ironwood and dealing with several uncomfortable encounters with the Taziri elders. Naya could barely contain her excitement about returning to space. She was not only trying to escape her increasingly clingy sister who knew Naya would soon depart, but also her troublesome instructor, the Taziri Master Kilora. Master Kilora had developed an unsettling interest in Naya, and Naya recognized exactly what kind of Taziri she was. Those with insider knowledge understood the existence of the Ku Taziri, political enforcers among the Taziri, and when Commander Lex had told Naya about the neural disruptions, she knew she wanted to keep her distance from that alien space dragon. It was concerning enough that Kilora was female. Male Ku Taziri were reasonable for predators, but females resembled keeping oceanic apex predators as household pets. Simultaneously, Naya quickly discovered that humans actually did keep predatory marine creatures as companions, so perhaps it was meant to be. Before departure, Naya had visited the Memorial Garden, the sacred place for fallen human warriors who served under the watchful eyes of the deity Ceros. Many crew members and soldiers had been recently laid to rest there, and she wanted to pay final respects. The burial ceremonies had been difficult for Naya and the other Taziri. Taziri warrior burials were loud events filled with music and singing, remnants of ancient traditions. But human ceremonies maintained deathly silence. The only sounds were footsteps on the ground, the creaking of burial containers, and wind rustling through the foliage. In the memorial garden, fallen soldiers were interred beneath markers with saplings of ironwood trees, creating sacred groves nourished by their remains. Unlike Taziri practices where bodies were cleansed and placed to rest unclothed, humans buried their dead in service uniforms with weapons positioned at attention beside them. The silence troubled Naya. She longed to sing or howl for the human spirits she sensed around them, but this wasn't their custom. After the burial containers were covered with soil and ironwood saplings planted in neat rows, musicians with horned instruments played sorrowful melodies carried through the air, speaking for those who couldn't break the morning silence. It seemed strange that nobody spoke, allowing the instruments to communicate for them, while the large banner above the garden fluttered in the breeze. The final conversation between living and dead, the last farewell to comrades. Never had Naya felt closer to the humans surrounding her as she and fellow Taziri stood at attention, though she glanced around curiously. Many humans appeared grim. Others wept silently with expressionless faces, such a contrast to what she knew of them. She had witnessed these men and women fight with ferocity typically seen only in creatures battling for survival, clawing and snarling to hold death at bay. She had seen them celebrate and sing joyously, turning weekly gatherings into festivities aboard ship. Yet here they stood, quiet as the graves before them, breaking Naya's heart whenever she glimpsed another human face. She learned that a silent human gives reason for concern. None of that bothered her now. She was safely back in space, dressed in her warrior attire and surrounded by her Brotherhood companions, whom she now knew she belonged with. The departure had proceeded smoothly, with repairs on the massive battleship completed efficiently. They had received latest models of descent pods, assault vessels, fighters, and bombers. Renovations had updated quarters and amenities. Civilian workers now operated small shops in new recreation areas, and military chefs sometimes employed civilians when needed. Command's reasoning behind these changes puzzled everyone, but they were welcomed. The Starstrider Ranger now featured numerous drinking establishments in various styles, including a tavern modeled after fantasy role-playing settings. Naya quite enjoyed that one. The battleship bustled with increased activity, as it now accommodated entire brigades of standard infantry who didn't descend from the sky in dropships or pods. Instead, they deployed via vehicle landing craft after aerial and special forces cleared the path. Standard forces utilized various weapons including indirect fire systems, artillery, and diverse vehicles with wheels and tracks. Escalating raids by the Cortheri made the demand for vehicles essential, as they too revealed their capabilities with hovercraft. Naya found herself in the fantasy-themed tavern one midweek evening. conversing with several standard infantry soldiers alongside her heavy assault infantry comrades about weapons demonstrations. Not quite. Another man replied with a chuckle, his head completely smooth. We'll use the extended range capabilities we've gained. According to specifications, our splendid space vessel received numerous tons of additions, including impressive armor plating that will challenge the core theory significantly. Jackson nodded, currently enjoying his fifth ale. Pilots must be cautious about planetary proximity now. If we get too close, gravitational pull would drag us down like a massive boulder. We're so heavy that other vessels dock directly onto us. I believe I awoke to see several destroyers attached to us like parasites. How much larger have we become? Trazik asked, still petting his companion creature, Whisper the Boneless. Trazik had secured special permission to purchase and bring the creature aboard, and they were practically inseparable. Jackson accessed his tablet, tapping until locating the desired file. Apparently some lead engineer capitalized on our damage and placed us into the Kraken's claws, whatever that means, and it began reconstructing the vessel. We now possess 2 hulls, original and new, and we're more than twice our previous size. Impressive, Naya remarked, swirling her meat. Starstrider will become a formidable force. Indeed, Jackson observed, scrolling through the document. We could engage an entire Corthery raiding fleet if desired, while carrying enough troops to overwhelm an entire military. The personnel count aboard this vessel alone exceeds populations of some planets. How many vessels of this magnitude exist? Trazik inquired, absently playing with his claws in Whisper's fur. 2, Jackson answered. Just 2 in the entire fleet. Us, and he squinted intensely at his device before turning bewildered eyes toward the humans around him. Dreadnought Face Melter. Excellent, the bald human commented, high-fiving another soldier nearby. That's the name I suggested. So the 2 largest battleships in the fleet are named Starstrider Ranger and Dreadnought Face Melter. Naya asked with raised eyebrows, then tilted her head at the humans. Why are you like this? Why can't you behave normally? Another soldier emitted a high-pitched screech, causing others to laugh or struggle not to spray beverages across their tables. So we have the distinction of serving on one of the 2 largest vessels in the fleet. That suggests we'll see considerable action, Naya said eagerly, already missing the sound of descent pods activating their deceleration thrusters. Is that also why we have so many shops now? Because other vessels can attach to us? Jackson continued reviewing his tablet. Exactly, but we'll receive constant resupplies. The standard infantry transports barely fit in the expanded hangars, so they needed a method for destroyers to attach along our exterior. The surface features large connection points that attach to our outer hull. That section remains independent from artificial gravity, creating a zero-gravity environment. The ship has variable gravity. Why? Naya asked, genuinely curious. Jackson shrugged. Simplifies cargo movement, I suppose. You don't need elevator platforms when you can attach items to conveyor systems and shuttle them back and forth. Fascinating, Naya mused, finishing her mead. She couldn't shake the feeling her furry self would be dragged into this weapons exhibition affair, and she would prove correct several weeks later. The sight of multiple Stellar Confederation representatives approaching the Starstrider Ranger was remarkable, but her eyes narrowed upon seeing the Taziri Stormwalker assault cruiser nestled in its docking position. It seemed peculiar watching the craft, once considered the pinnacle of Taziri naval combat, resembling a small bird perched on a massive tree trunk. She imagined the Taziri vessel commander fuming angrily on his flight deck, knowing even human destroyers outclassed his ship. When she received the notification on her tablet, she sighed dramatically and headed to the armory to don her heavy assault armor. They wanted representatives of each trooper classification wearing their combat gear to impress the other Confederation members. Naya decided to leave her helmet off, anticipating other Taziri would call her a Rakazi, and she wanted them to see her expression when she told them where to go. Naya arrived as the only Taziri among the heavy assault drop infantry, the rest being humans, but they extended their fists to her in greeting, showing respect. Naya had earned her place fighting alongside them on the battlefield, and they treated her as they would any human comrade. "Morning, Sergeant," a female human named Thalia greeted, her vibrant eyes and pale hair shining in the overhead lights, ready to show the other canines what a true warrior looks like. Naya snorted dismissively. They wouldn't recognize a warrior if one relieved itself on their limb. The humans chuckled appreciatively. They preferred Naya over other Taziri because of how quickly she adapted to human customs. Naya noticed the light infantry arranging a long display table and gestured toward her group. "Let's see what the lightweight troops and standard infantry are preparing," she suggested. "Certainly, Sergeant," a large human named Ashford replied, his dark hair cut extremely short. "I believe they brought numerous historical items with them." Naya raised an eyebrow, but observed the standard infantry unveiling several massive automatic weapons, some she had trained with during basic training. Her infantry type didn't typically use them. They were usually mounted on vehicles or defensive positions. "They brought heavy automatic weapons?" Naya asked as the soldier positioned the large weapon on its support stand. "Aren't they concerned the ammunition might penetrate the walls?" Ashford chuckled. "No, Sergeant. The range can handle it. Cutting-edge design capable of withstanding explosive rounds if necessary." "I hear you, Furball," one of the standard infantry called out, raising a hand to Naya. Standard forces were an interesting group. They specialized in securing locations on the ground or operating vehicles to engage enemies in their own armor. She had observed their training several times, maneuvering in their wheeled or tracked war machines, but they were trained to capture and defend planets, not crash from the sky to eliminate everything around them as quickly as possible. Not that she minded. She quite enjoyed her role. It was straightforward. Their armor differed slightly from light infantry. Light infantry primarily wore chest protection and leg guards, while standard forces added shoulder armor, though neither featured the helpful propulsion systems or thick plating of heavy assault troops. Fortunately, some Tauren and Marai warriors served in the light and standard infantry, allowing for friendly banter as weapons were unpacked and displayed. After extensive preparation, other species began arriving. The Taziri delegation arrived first, 20 representatives with 6 weapons in tow. Naya glared at them continuously, and the other Taziri wouldn't risk looking at her due to the humans standing protectively around her, silently daring them to speak to their sergeant. They understood what Rekazi meant and knew Taziri despised the term. The story of Naya's encounter with the elders had spread rapidly. Next came 30 Taurens hauling elongated weapons alongside their own armament samples. The Taurens showed much more friendliness than the Taziri, quickly engaging humans and other Taurens in conversation. The Marai and Whispers arrived together with the Nimi. Though the latter brought no weapons, they merely wished to observe and learn about the weapons protecting them. The Avian Opticans arrived with the surprising addition of the Aurorians, both species unexpectedly bringing weapons for testing. The Avians brought 2 innovative weapons to measure their performance against conventional arsenals, knowing that while they weren't warriors themselves, they could at least produce weapons to assist non-human Confederation members. The 20 Aurorians presented an entirely different situation. Somehow they had accelerated their evolutionary process and no longer resembled simple slime masses riding in containment suits. They now appeared humanoid. Naya, with narrowed eyes, along with nearly everyone else at the range, observed they actually resembled humans significantly, one might say almost identically, just in various slime colorations. The resemblance was so uncanny it made Naya's skin crawl. Despite being unified masses of living protoplasm, they possessed hair, faces, opposable digits, fingers. They even had ear-like structures. They evolved to create eyes complete with small indentations indicating pupils. They still wore protective suits, but these primarily prevented them from adhering to surfaces and facilitated better communication. A translation device on their neck coverings converted their thoughts into words with remarkable sophistication, even replicating emotions and speech inflections. "Greetings," A purple Aurorian called cheerfully, waving the slightly transparent purple appendage. "This vessel is enormous." Naya heard the feminine voice, noticed the Aurorian possessed appropriate physical characteristics to appear female, and even moved accordingly. But she knew they were Aurorians. They didn't naturally have physical forms, let alone gender dimorphism. "Hello," Naya said, extending her hand reflexively. The Aurorian accepted it, and the sensation against her palm pads made Naya's spine tingle with discomfort even as the purple Aurorian enthusiastically shook it. "Hello, wonderful to be here. We couldn't miss this gathering, especially after Earth considered allowing us Aurorians to serve as maintenance specialists on their vessels," the purple Aurorian exclaimed, and Naya noticed her lips moved as the translation device spoke. "They're going to serve on our ships," a human quietly whispered behind Naya, and several soldiers shrugged. "I suppose they can access confined spaces," Clayton Hardy murmured, watching the Aurorians walk past to be greeted by human officers. Ashford scratched his chin, observing a yellow Aurorian female stride past with a cheerful expression. "Does anyone else think their species name sounds like a bodily secretion? It's not just me, right?" "Mist mucus has quite the gelatinous assets," a particularly short human muttered, causing Naya to involuntarily snort before clamping her hand to her nose, turning to glare at the human while everyone else suppressed laughter. After the officers completed their presentation about cooperation and collaborative progress toward victory, nearly half an hour had elapsed. All human-aligned troops were practically ready to gouge their eyes from boredom. Officers, especially human officers of higher rank, could be exceptionally verbose. Finally, the speeches concluded, and everyone gradually regained mental focus as the Opticans prepared to demonstrate first. "We present the Optican Test Alpha Pulse Repeater," an impressive Optican male announced, displaying an unusual rifle and gesturing to a nearby standard infantry soldier. "It produces minimal recoil with excellent performance at close range. An effective short-range weapon against various targets." A nearby male soldier rolled his eyes before accepting the weapon from the Optican. "I shall attempt this, I suppose." The Optican instructed the human through operation procedures, and within moments, the soldier had mastered the technique. The repeater produced loud bursts of energy that fired bolts of light several centimeters long, striking targets with scorched impact points that burned through several millimeters of steel simultaneously. After discharging a small magazine, the soldier dripped with perspiration, the barrel heat unbearable. "Ah," the Optican said with an apologetic smile, "we continue experiencing thermal regulation challenges." "This resembles firing a portable cooking device," the soldier remarked, wiping his face with his uniform sleeve as the entire weapon distorted the surrounding air with heat. Subsequently, the Opticans displayed a sidearm with similar design, nearly matching the rifle's volume and heat output. What truly captured Naya's attention, along with the other heavy assault troops, was their defensive shield. Opticans maintained fascination with ancient human warriors and had developed a powered shield incorporating ballistic fiber, woven metal layers, a slot for melee weapon storage, a concealed blade as secondary defense, and something called a disruption device. This mechanism caused microscopic vibrations across the shield's surface that could fragment projectiles upon impact through vibration alone. It could withstand approximately 100 impacts before the disruption device failed, more than sufficient for Naya. All heavy assault troops gathered to offer suggestions to the Opticans, particularly regarding weapon rests to facilitate shooting while moving. The Aurorians presented no weapons, instead socializing with humans and other species while behaving as polite guests aboard the vessel. Naya struggled not to appreciate the purple Aurorian she'd met earlier, who demonstrated such sweet, kind, polite, and inquisitive qualities. What are they planning, those peculiar amorphous beings? Naya thought to herself, trying to focus on the Taurans. The Taurans naturally attempted to advance plasma projector technology, but their weapons proved woefully inadequate without substantial power reserves and specialized gas. Although these weapons could penetrate steel targets, they required several minutes between discharges. Faster loading versions indeed reloaded more quickly but suffered from laughable range limitations. The Porans explained they sought partnerships with Opticans and humans to develop larger vehicle-mounted weapon systems. The Carlin and Mirai instead showcased newer close combat weapons, recognizing their disadvantage in this particular demonstration. The Mirai displayed multiple weapons simultaneously with their additional limbs, their engraved metallic masks tilting as they explained each item's function: pulse daggers, disruptor blades, energy spears with glowing tips, all attempting to attract human officers' interest. The Carlins similarly demonstrated their close-quarters combat weapons, such as power claws and energy talons. These weapons generated significant discussion and underwent testing on various materials. The energy talons and pulse daggers particularly interested light and heavy infantry, as sometimes their standard blades or bayonets proved unsuitable against unarmored adversaries. The Taziri contingent spoke last, pretending their weapons represented the pinnacle of development. They presented their newest magnetic accelerator projectile launchers powered by advanced coils and electromagnets. These impressed with their effectiveness and near-silent operation, but humans remained skeptical. The rifles, sidearms, and crew-operated weapons showed promise, but still required substantial power reserves. Despite their advances in penetration capabilities and reduced acoustic signature, their power requirements couldn't be ignored. Even Naya acknowledged the improvements compared to earlier models she had used back home. Discussion about Taziri weapons continued extensively until Ashford commented that the rifles were charming. "What did you say?" A blue-furred Taziri demanded arrogantly. "Charming. What aspect of your weapons do you find charming, Mr. Ashford?" "Specialist Ashford," Naya corrected firmly, fixing her gaze on the Taziri and daring him to challenge her. He didn't, instead gritting his teeth while addressing the human. "Specialist Ashford, what aspects do you find charming?" Ashford shrugged casually. "They're aesthetically pleasing, sleek, and sophisticated, but they demand excessive power consumption. Even if we can penetrate armored vehicle plating with that rifle, how many times can we achieve this? How long do power cells last? Are they weather resistant? Can they withstand impacts? Are they shock resistant? Are they protected against electromagnetic interference?" The Taziri flattened their ears. Ashford had identified every weakness. They recognized and despised that he had done so with such efficiency. While supporting Taziri and Poran garrison units, they mentioned their power cells depleted rapidly and recharged slowly, Naya added, causing all Taziri to stare at her. She enjoyed how they had to look up slightly. The rifles also demonstrated inadequate penetration, as the projectiles couldn't exceed acoustic barriers to achieve necessary velocity. The discussion continued extensively, but after exhausting relevant topics, it became the humans' turn to display their equipment. Long tables stood before the range with weapons arranged for demonstration, while others were disassembled for inspection. "Sergeant Naya, would you please demonstrate?" Colonel Harmon requested, gesturing toward the weapon display while addressing the assembled delegates. "While your weapons are undeniably impressive, and please understand they truly are impressive, limitations remain. For instance, Sergeant Naya will now fire a preheated Opticon repeater." Naya raised the rifle, her face already uncomfortable from the heat, and pressed the trigger. It discharged 20 energy bursts before shutting down with a sharp click and cooling wine from its safety systems. "It overheats rapidly and becomes inoperable until completely cooled," Colonel Harmon noted, recalling intelligence briefing points. "Then consider the Poran plasma projectors." Naya demonstrated various weapons, launching projectiles downrange toward distant targets. Some shots fell significantly short. These offer limited range, require power sources, and cannot engage distant targets, Colonel Harmon explained politely. Similar observations applied to Taziri magnetic accelerators. Naya recognized the familiar handling characteristics of the rifles as she operated them, but found them severely lacking as she fired. The projectiles lost effectiveness at distance due to velocity limitations. Limited range, power-dependent, and unable to maintain sustained fire, Colonel Harmon stated while maintaining professional composure. I understand these represent your standard armaments, and you've expressed skepticism regarding our chemically propelled weapons, but allow me to demonstrate why we've employed these weapons for millennia. Sergeant Naya, please operate the heavy automatic weapon at maximum capacity across all target distances. Everyone else, please wear hearing protection being distributed. Naya smiled privately before turning toward the other Taziri with a broad grin. They detested her, and truthfully, she reciprocated those feelings. She wanted them to witness the inadequacy of their weapons. Looking down at the receiver of the automatic weapon, she gently patted it. These heavy machine guns predated modern history yet continued production. Taziri technology became obsolete and recycled after brief service periods. They maintained no legacy weapons. Humans preserved their weapons indefinitely, and she enjoyed discovering vintage models. This exemplified an ancient workhorse receiving modern improvements. Naya traced her finger along the feed cover, recognizing unusual human place names inscribed there. She removed the cap from a nearby marking implement and quietly added Starstrider Ranger to the feed cover, continuing the tradition. Naya smiled triumphantly, honored to operate such a venerable war machine, and loaded the linked ammunition. She secured the feed cover, pulled the charging handle with a precise mechanical sound, then pressed her thumbs against the butterfly trigger, sending tracer rounds downrange toward targets. The bone-rattling percussion of the weapon stirred the fur on Naya's face, prompting an involuntary smile as she swept the weapon back and forth. The Aurorians watched wide-eyed, politely clapping in amazement. The Opticans and Taziri observed in horror as rounds shredded through steel targets, as though they were constructed from flimsy material. The Torrents displayed greater reservation in their interest, actively recording observations. Wait, does that Aurorian possess mammary glands? Someone tell Ashford to avert his gaze. Naya snorted and closed the window, then raised her rifle to her eye. With precisely timed trigger pulls, she struck the heads of steel targets effortlessly, then gradually increased her firing pace. Just unleash everything, came Colonel Harmon's message to her helmet. Empty every magazine. Naya's teeth gleamed inside her helmet as she rapidly depleted her entire combat load, ejecting empty magazines and inserting fresh ones with practiced efficiency. Upon finishing all 10 magazines, she removed her helmet with dramatic flair. Steel and honor. Naya called to the humans behind her, smiling wickedly at the visibly outraged Taziri as humans whooped and cheered. To her satisfaction, other Confederation members appeared impressed, nodding respectfully while politely applauding. As my technical advisors confirm, and as you all witnessed, she hit every target successfully at distances beyond 400 units, Colonel Harmon stated proudly, gesturing toward both Naya and the range. All with simple magazine changes. No batteries or power source required, just metal, propellant, and projectiles. A golden Aurorian stood, applauding briefly before addressing Colonel Harmon. Most impressive and superior to anything we could develop. Would you consider selling these weapons? I find myself desperate for such reliability. I concur, the Optican leader agreed, running a finger along his beak. These would make excellent secondary weapons as contingencies during power fluctuations. Other species nodded and murmured agreement, except the Taziri. While impressive, the Taziri leader stated, struggling not to flatten his ears, I believe we can still improve with additional development time. Colonel Harmon bowed respectfully. Certainly, I believe technological competition benefits everyone involved. These represent merely our personal weapons. If you're interested in examining our larger vehicles, several are en route. We're also willing to showcase our vessel's primary armaments. You might find the particle beam batteries quite fascinating. Naya exhaled contentedly while securing her weapon and armor, then defiantly extended her tongue in a toothy grin toward the other Taziri when she turned toward the humans. They whistled and applauded as she rejoined them, and she knew she belonged nowhere else. Afterward, once other Confederation representatives departed to inspect tanks and armored transports, all Taziri aboard ship gathered Naya into the tavern for an intimate celebration of camaraderie. Multiple food platters covered tables as the Starhounds of Third Company celebrated like humans, defying their fellow Taziri who would label them as outsiders.